a werewolf shifter romance written by Rosie. The hall was silent as she entered. Her footsteps echoed on the black marble, too firm for someone who should have been nervous. Scarlett looked like something out of a dream. Her blood-red gown cascaded in layers of silk and tulle that floated around her like living flames, embroidered with golden threads that shimmered with every movement. The neckline was elegant, her shoulders bare, and a delicate gold choker encircled her neck. Her blonde hair fell in loose waves down her back, with a few strands braided and held by ruby-studded pins. She was extraordinarily beautiful. The kind of beauty that made men stop to stare and women avert their eyes with envy. There was something ethereal about her, as if she didn't quite belong to this world. Eyes too bright, movements too graceful. But Killian saw past the beauty, and what he saw sickened him. He sat on the throne, a dark figure against the faint torchlight, tall, broad-shouldered, black hair falling slightly over his ice-colored eyes. He didn't move as she approached. He didn't smile. He showed nothing. Beside him, his advisor Jasper, an older man with a gray beard, whispered something in his ear. "She is striking, Your Highness?" Killian didn't even blink. Scarlett stopped 10 feet from the throne. The red of her dress contrasted violently with the black stone around her, like blood spilled on ice. She curtsied not too deep, just enough, and when she rose, her eyes met his directly. "I am Scarlett, daughter of Cromwell, leader of the Western Pack. I come on behalf of the alliance our people so desire." Guards lined the walls, servants lurked in the shadows, but in that instant, the silence was absolute. "Alliance?" He repeated the word as if it were a cruel joke. "Your father killed 3 of my men, burned an entire village on the border. And now he sends me, you," he said with thinly veiled disdain. Something flashed in Scarlett's eyes. Anger, perhaps, but she maintained her composure. "My father made mistakes, but war only brings more death. I am here to build an alliance." "An alliance?" Killian rose slowly. He was even more imposing standing. He descended the throne steps with the dangerous grace of a predator. "And what makes you think I want an alliance, Lady Scarlett? Perhaps I'd prefer to see your father's kingdom in ashes." He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could see the tiny flecks of gold in his clear eyes. But there was no admiration in his gaze, only coldness. Scarlett's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. The red of her dress seemed more intense now, almost vibrant against his darkness. "Then why did you accept my coming?" Killian tilted his head, his icy eyes piercing hers. "Because I want to know what your father truly wants. What game he's playing." Scarlett felt her face flush but kept her voice steady. "I am not a piece in your games." Killian ignored her. "Jasper, take her to her chambers. Have her watched day and night." "Watched? I am your betrothed, not your prisoner. I haven't decided the difference yet. And considering who your father is, I'd bet on the latter." He turned his back and returned to the throne without looking back. The rejection was deliberate, calculated to wound, and it worked. Scarlett clenched her fists at her sides, feeling the silk slip through her fingers. She took a deep breath. She kept her mask, but inside, something burned rage and humiliation. Behind her, a small, silent figure waited by the doors. It was Nadia, her maid, her brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, her hands clasped in front of her. She kept her eyes downcast, discreet as always. Jasper gestured for them to follow him. As they walked through the stone corridors, Scarlett felt the weight of stairs. Servants paused to watch her pass. Guards turned their heads. Her red dress left a trail of light and movement behind her, as if she were a flame walking through the darkness. Nadia walked 2 paces behind, silent, but Scarlett could feel her concern. Jasper stopped before a dark wooden door and opened it. "Your chambers, Lady Scarlett. You, miss, will stay in the adjacent room." He indicated a smaller door beside it. "There will be guards in the corridor, for your safety." "Of course," Scarlett replied, her voice sharper than intended. Jasper bowed his head and withdrew, closing the door behind him. Chapter 1. The first days in the castle were marked by a suffocating silence. Scarlett woke, dressed, ate alone in her room, and spent hours staring out the window at the snow that never stopped falling. Nadia tried to cheer her up with light conversation, but even her friend seemed to be suffocating in the silence of that place. Killian didn't seek her out once. She hadn't seen him since that first encounter in the hall. No shared meals, no conversation, no attempt to get to know her or even pretend the alliance meant something. It was as if she didn't exist. That morning, Scarlett sat at her room's table, idly stirring the coffee Nadia had brought, when firm knocks sounded at the door. It wasn't Nadia. It was Jasper. "Lady Scarlett," he said formally, stopping in the doorway, "your presence is requested for today's hunt. There are representatives from the Eastern Pack attending, and as future queen, they expect to see you." Scarlett felt her stomach clench. A hunt with Killian. When? In 2 hours. Wear something appropriate for riding. Jasper paused, his eyes sweeping over the dressing gown she wore. Something practical and discreet. The veiled criticism was not lost on her. Scarlett pressed her lips together but nodded. As soon as Jasper left, Nadia rushed in from the adjacent room. You heard? I heard. Scarlett stood, walking to the wardrobe. He wants me to be discreet. He wants me to disappear, then do the opposite. Scarlett looked at her friend. Nadia crossed her arms. You need him to notice you. You need him to see you. If you continue to be ignored, how will you complete your mission? Scarlett knew she was right. She opened the wardrobe and searched. Her fingers stopped on a riding outfit, black leather breeches, a fitted forest green tunic with silver details, and a heavy fur-lined cloak, practical yet elegant. There was no way to ignore her, but she also couldn't be accused of impropriety. This one, she decided. Nadia helped her dress, braiding her blonde hair into an elaborate plait that would fall down her back without getting in the way while riding, and high leather boots completed the look. The courtyard was bustling when she descended. Horses being prepared, servants rushing with equipment, nobles adjusting their hunting attire. The air was chilly, but the promise of approaching spring made it less biting. Representatives from the Eastern Pack were already mounted, the same stout, red-bearded man she had seen before, Lester, and several other nobles, all men, she noticed. She would be the only woman on the hunt. And at the center of it all, already mounted on an imposing black stallion, was Killian. He wore hunting clothes, a dark tunic, a wolf fur cloak, his bow and quiver on his back. He looked even more intimidating like this, wild in a way that perfectly suited the environment. He was talking with Lester when Scarlett arrived. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. Scarlett maintained an upright posture, walking to where a stable hand held a horse for her. A gray mare, beautiful but clearly chosen for being docile and safe. She arched an eyebrow. Is this my horse? The stable hand looked uncomfortable. Yes, my lady. Lord Jasper's order. He's calm and I don't need calm. Scarlett looked around and her eyes landed on a fiery, clearly difficult brown stallion being held by two men. That one. I want that one. My lady, this horse is perfect, she interrupted him. The stallion snorted, shaking its head, but when Scarlett extended her hand, speaking low in her native dialect, the animal calmed. She mounted in a fluid movement, settling into the saddle with the ease of someone who had spent their entire life riding. The silence in the courtyard was absolute. Lady Scarlett, it's an honor. I am Lester, ambassador of the Eastern Pack, to new beginnings and lasting alliances. Others bowed. Scarlett did the same, forcing a smile. Thank you, Lord Lester. I must say, Lester continued, it's reassuring to see that even in difficult times, love can still blossom. Scarlett risked a glance at Killian. He had turned his attention back to his bow, checking the string, his face utterly unexpressive. Killian is a lucky man, Lester went on, clearly oblivious to the tension. Beauty and grace, a rare combination in these times. Killian does not consider himself lucky, Killian suddenly said, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. He considers this a political necessity, nothing more. Discomfort spread through the group. Some horses whinnied, sensing their rider's tension. Scarlett felt her cheeks flush but maintained her composure. She adjusted the reins carefully, and when she spoke, her voice was calm. And Lady Scarlett considers this a sacrifice. To leave her home, her family, to come to a place where she is not welcome. She guided her horse closer, until she was beside Killian's black stallion. Her eyes met his for the first time. But sacrifices are necessary in times of war, are they not, Your Highness? Killian's eyes finally focused on her. Icy, penetrating. Sacrifices, he repeated slowly, his horse whinnying slightly under its rider's tension. Curious choice of words, Lady Scarlett. Especially coming from someone whose family caused so many sacrifices to mine. Then perhaps this is the first step to correcting that, she said. Or perhaps it's just the beginning of new mistakes, he replied. The tension between them was palpable. The horses felt it, dancing nervously. No one dared to move. Finally, Jasper cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the hounds are ready. Shall we depart? Killian looked away first, turning his horse toward the gate. Yes, let's go. The hunt led them into the dense forest surrounding the castle. Snow still covered the ground in patches, but there were clear signs that spring was arriving, green shoots emerging among the trees, the sound of water running from thawing streams. They rode in a dispersed formation, the hunting dogs running ahead, sniffing, Scarlett stayed in the middle of the group, aware of the curious glances she received. It was clear no one expected her to actually participate. They assumed she would stay behind, perhaps return early. But when the hounds found the trail of a deer and the group sped off in pursuit, Scarlett didn't hesitate. She loosened the reins and her stallion responded instantly, accelerating through the trees with impressive speed. She overtook several riders, the wind whipping her face, adrenaline singing in her veins. When she reached the front of the group, only 2 riders were ahead of her, Lester and Killian. Killian looked back, genuine surprise crossing his features when he saw her. But then something else appeared, defiance. He sped up further. She did the same. They galloped side by side for a moment, low branches forcing them to duck, roots threatening to trip the horses. It was dangerous, reckless, and absolutely thrilling. The hunt continued for a few more hours. Scarlett actively participated, repeatedly proving her skill both in riding and with the bow. When they finally returned to the castle, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. The riders dispersed, the Eastern representatives animatedly discussing the successful hunt. Scarlett was about to head to her chambers when she heard his voice. "Lady Scarlett, stay." She froze. The other guests slowly departed, casting curious glances over their shoulders. Soon, only she, Killian, and Jasper remained. "You overstepped today." Scarlett blinked, incredulous. "I overstepped?" "Your reply, in front of the ambassadors. You made it seem as if I am a tyrant. And aren't you?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Finally, Killian turned around. His eyes met hers. "You are alive, fed, protected. Many in your position would be far worse off." "In my position," Scarlett repeated, taking a step forward. "You mean as a prisoner disguised as a bride?" "I mean as the daughter of a man who killed my people. I am not like my father." "No?" Killian walked towards her, each step deliberate. "Then why do you carry the same calculating eyes? Why does every word that comes out of your mouth sound rehearsed?" He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could see the darker flecks in his gray eyes. "You want me to trust you, Lady Scarlett?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Then stop acting, and tell me the truth. Why are you here?" Scarlett's heart hammered in her chest. She could feel the weight of the dagger on her thigh, hidden beneath the layers of fabric. She could feel the weight of the entire mission crushing her shoulders. "I am here," she said softly, "because I had no choice. Just as you had no choice in accepting me." Killian studied her for a long moment. Then he took a step back. "Jasper, escort Lady Scarlett to her chambers." "Killian," she began. "That is all, Lady Scarlett?" He turned his back to her again. "You may go." The dismissal was clear. Absolute. Scarlett clenched her fists, but said nothing more. She turned and left, Jasper following her in silence. Nadia was waiting when she entered. One look at Scarlett's face was enough. Was it terrible? Worse. Scarlett collapsed onto the bed. "He hates me, Nadia. Truly hates me." Nadia sat beside her, and Scarlett closed her eyes. "How will I survive 3 months like this?" Nadia gently touched her hand. "One day at a time." The days continued to drag on. Cold in the castle. Scarlett had given up expecting any approach from Killian. He completely ignored her, and she had learned to do the same. Chapter 2. Insomnia had become her constant companion. After tossing and turning in bed for hours, Scarlett decided to go down to the kitchens. The guards didn't mind her nocturnal wanderings, as long as she didn't try to leave the castle. But when she pushed open the back pantry door, she heard a quick rustle. Something fell to the floor with a dull thud. Someone was there. Scarlett advanced slowly, circling the flour barrels. And then she saw him. A boy. He couldn't have been more than 7. Too thin in ragged clothes, covered in mud and half-melted snow. Disheveled brown hair falling over eyes wide with pure terror. He was crouched near the shelves, clutching a piece of bread to his chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Their eyes met. The boy flinched, preparing to flee. "Wait. I won't hurt you," Scarlett whispered, raising her hands slowly. He didn't move, but he didn't run either. He watched her like a cornered animal, ready to bolt at the slightest wrong move. Scarlett slowly knelt, getting to his level. The faint moonlight streaming through the window illuminated the boy's thin face, prominent cheekbones, and accumulated dirt. "Are you hungry?" The boy didn't answer, but his eyes betrayed everything. He was starving. "What's your name?" she asked gently. Silence. Just those big, frightened eyes fixed on her. Scarlett looked around and picked an apple from a nearby basket. She held it out to him carefully, without sudden movements. "Here, take this too." The boy hesitated. His eyes went from the apple to Scarlett's face, then back to the apple, as if trying to calculate if it was a trap. Slowly, very slowly, he reached out his hand. His fingers were dirty, trembling, and cold as they brushed hers when he took the fruit. "Where do you live?" Scarlett asked softly, a slight nod pointing towards the forest. "Alone?" Another nod, more hesitant this time. Scarlett's chest tightened. She didn't have enough authority to offer him a room in the castle. She couldn't report that he was stealing food from the kitchen. It was dangerous. But he was a child, completely alone, in the brutal winter. "Listen," she said, keeping her voice gentle. "I'll leave food for you, but not in here. It's too dangerous. The guards might catch you," she thought quickly. "Do you know the gardens at the back of the castle? The ones near the west wall?" The boy nodded. "There's a stone bench there, near the old trees. I'll leave a package under it every night after dark, all right?" The boy's eyes widened. For the first time, there was something besides fear there. A small spark of hope. Then, without saying another word, he ran. He disappeared through the back door like a shadow, leaving only wet footprints on the stone floor. That night, and every night thereafter, Scarlett kept her promise. She would go down to the kitchen when the castle slept, take bread, cheese, fruit, anything substantial that wouldn't be missed, and take it to the bench in the gardens. On the first night, she left the package and left. On the second, she waited, and the boy appeared. He emerged from the shadows like a ghost, took the food, and was about to flee when Scarlett spoke. "You don't have to leave. You can eat here. It's warmer near the castle walls." The boy froze. He looked at her, then at the food, then back at her. Scarlett sat on the bench, keeping her distance. "I don't bite, I promise." He hesitated. Then, slowly, he sat on the opposite end of the bench, as far from her as possible, without leaving completely. They stayed like that for a while. The boy eating ravenously, Scarlett looking up at the stars above. "Lucan," he said suddenly. Scarlett looked at him. "My name. It's Lucan." A small smile touched her lips. "That's a good name." She paused. "I'm Scarlett." Lucan mumbled, his mouth still full of bread. "I know. Everyone in the castle talks about the blonde lady from the west." "They do?" Scarlett arched an eyebrow. "And what do they say?" Lucan shrugged. "That you're very beautiful. But that the king doesn't like you." Scarlett laughed softly. "Well, they're not wrong." In the following days, those nightly meetings became routine. Lucan would appear, eat, and gradually begin to speak more. Never much. He was still suspicious, still flinched at quick movements, but enough for Scarlett to begin to understand his story. In the following days, those nightly meetings became routine. Lucan would appear, eat, and gradually begin to speak more. Never much. He was still suspicious, still flinched at quick movements, but enough for Scarlett to begin to understand his story. He was an orphan. He lived alone, surviving in an abandoned hut in the forest. He hunted when he could, stole when he needed to. Scarlett's heart ached. "Do you have blankets? Firewood?" "A little." "That's not an answer." Lucan looked away. When she returned to her room, Scarlett began to gather things. An old blanket that was stored in the closet? A wool coat she didn't use? Gloves, flint for making fire. Nadia noticed, of course. "What are you doing?" she asked, watching Scarlett fold the things carefully. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Scarlett, it's just a child." Scarlett stopped, looking at her friend. "A child alone and cold. I just want to help." Nadia sighed, but didn't argue. "Be careful." Chapter 3. Lucan had mentioned where the hut was, and she wanted to see the conditions with her own eyes. Maybe she could do more. Bring larger things that she couldn't carry to the bench. The forest was dense and dark, lit only by the crescent moon. Scarlett followed Lucan's vague instructions, her heart beating faster with each step. She wasn't afraid of getting lost. She had a good sense of direction, but the forest at night was a different place. Predators hunted in the dark. She found the hut after about 20 minutes of walking. It was worse than she imagined. The rotten wooden walls barely stood, the roof had holes large enough to let the snow in, and there was only a door hanging on rusty hinges. Scarlett approached slowly, about to knock, when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around quickly, her heart pounding, her hand instinctively going to the dagger hidden in her thigh. But it wasn't an animal, nor a bandit. It was Killian. He emerged from the tree line, carrying a large bundle. He stopped abruptly when he saw her, clear surprise crossing his normally unexpressive face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other in the gloom of the forest. both clearly processing the impossible situation. Killian's eyes went from her face to the bundle in her hands, then to the hut behind her. Slow understanding crossed his features. The boy? Scarlett nodded, still tense, still holding the bundle to her chest. Killian looked at the package he himself carried, larger than hers, probably containing wood and more supplies, judging by the shape. How long? A week, she said. 3 days, he replied. I tried to convince him to stay at the castle. He ran from me for days, only reappeared when I stopped mentioning it. The silence stretched between them, laden with something strange. It wasn't hostility, not exactly. It was more like mutual recognition, as if they had discovered something about each other that they hadn't expected to find. Before either could speak again, the hut door opened a crack. Lucan peeked out, eyes wide at the sight of both of them. It's okay, Lucan, Scarlett said quickly, keeping her voice soft. He's here to help too. Lucan looked from Scarlett to Killian, clearly nervous. The king was an imposing figure even when not trying to intimidate, and to an already frightened child he must have seemed terrifying. I brought wood, he said, his voice softer than Scarlett had ever heard. And tools to fix your roof. Can you show me where the worst holes are? Lucan hesitated, looking at Scarlett as if asking for approval. She nodded encouragingly. The boy slowly opened the door and came out. Killian stood and followed him to the side of the hut, and Scarlett accompanied them, still processing everything. They spent the next hour working in silence. Killian fixed what he could of the roof with the wood he had brought, showing surprising skill with his hands. Scarlett organized the supplies inside the hut, blankets, food, an oil lamp she had managed to get from the kitchens. Lucan watched everything with wide eyes, as if he couldn't believe it was happening. When they finished, the hut was still far from perfect, but it was considerably better. At least the snow wouldn't get in anymore. You need to keep the fire lit, Killian told Lucan, his voice returning to that neutral tone. And if you need more firewood, there's a pile behind the east wall of the castle. The guards don't watch that side as closely. Lucan nodded vigorously. Scarlett knelt in front of the boy. You can still find me on the bench every night. All right? All right, Lucan whispered. And then, to her surprise, he threw himself forward and hugged her, a quick, tight hug before pulling away, embarrassed. Scarlett felt her eyes sting. Sleep well, Lucan. The walk back to the castle was strange. Killian and Scarlett walked side by side, but they didn't talk. The silence wasn't exactly comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was laden with something unsaid, a different tension than usually existed between them. It was Killian who broke the silence first when they were already near the wall. How did you find him? Stealing food in the kitchens, Scarlett replied. And you? I saw small footprints in the snow. I followed them. Then Killian spoke again, lower this time. You didn't have to do that. Neither did you. He looked at her sideways. They reached the back entrance of the castle. Killian stopped, turning to her. Your shoulders, he said suddenly. Scarlett blinked. What? When you bent down to adjust the blankets? I saw... He hesitated, his jaw tightening. There were scars. Scarlett's blood ran cold. She had been careful, always covered her back, her shoulders. But in that moment, focused on helping Lucan, she must have bent in a way that made the fabric of her dress slip. It's nothing, she said quickly, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It didn't look like nothing. Who hurt you? The question came out low, but there was a sharp edge there. Scarlett looked away. That's none of your business. You are under my roof. He paused, as if that bothered him. That gives me the right to nothing. Scarlett cut him off, turning to him with blazing eyes. You have no right over me, Killian. She walked past him, her steps quick and furious in the snow, but she felt his gaze on her back until she disappeared inside the castle. That night, alone in her room, Scarlett sat on the bed and put her head in her hands. The scars burned as if they were new. Memories she tried to keep buried resurfaced. Her father's voice, the pain, the humiliation. She touched her thigh, feeling the outline of the dagger through the fabric of her dress. 3 months. She had 3 months to complete her mission. But for the first time since she arrived, Scarlett wondered if she would be capable. The following days brought a strangeness Scarlett couldn't name. Killian didn't mention the scars again. He didn't seek her out, nor did he touch on the subject of that night in the forest again. But something, however subtle, had changed. An invisible crack had opened in the wall of ice he kept around himself. She noticed it in the small gestures, and the way he no longer looked away when they crossed paths in the corridors. In the slight nod during meals in the hall, a silent, too discreet acknowledgement for anyone else to notice. But she noticed, and it disturbed her, because the more she saw of him, the harder it became to remember why she was there. Lucan continued to appear on the bench every night. Sometimes Killian did too. Neither of them planned the encounters, but somehow they happened. The three sat side by side on the cold stone, Lucan devouring the food while Scarlett and Killian kept a careful distance. The boy seemed content with that arrangement. He spoke more, smiled occasionally. He still startled at sudden movements, but there was a new light in his eyes. Chapter 4. The news came 3 weeks after her arrival. Jasper appeared in her chambers one morning, his face serious. "Lady Scarlett, your family will arrive tonight for a formal dinner. Your father, your stepmother, and your half-brother. Killian requests your presence." Scarlett felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "My family?" "Yes, to discuss the final terms of the alliance." Jasper studied her. "Are you well, Lady Scarlett? You've gone pale." "I'm fine. Just surprised. I didn't expect to see them so soon." She lied, forcing a smile. Jasper nodded and left, leaving Scarlett alone with the panic growing in her chest. Nadia rushed in from the adjacent room as soon as the door closed, her face already tense with worry. "Scarlett?" "I know." Scarlett sat on the bed, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. Nadia knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "There will be people, witnesses. He can't do anything in front of everyone. You know my father." Scarlett laughed without humor. Scarlett looked at her friend. Nadia had seen too much over the years. She had cleaned blood and healed wounds, held Scarlett as she cried, hidden evidence. She knew exactly what Cromwell was capable of. The dinner would be in the main hall. Scarlett spent hours getting ready, or rather, letting Nadia get her ready while her mind spun in circles of panic. She had seen her father only once since she arrived the day he handed her over to Killian, as if she were cattle at market. He had shown no emotion. No farewell, no concern. Only that cold gaze that said, "Don't disappoint me." Nadia chose a dark blue dress, elegant yet discreet. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned Scarlett's hair into a simple bun, with a few loose strands framing her face. "You look beautiful," Nadia said softly, but her voice carried tension. Scarlett looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked composed, calm, nothing to indicate the inner turmoil. The hall was lit when she arrived. Torches on the walls, candles on the long wooden table. Killian was already there, seated at the head, formally dressed in black and silver. He looked at her as she entered, his gaze sweeping her face for a moment before nodding briefly. Jasper indicated her place beside Killian, for the first time, as it should be for a bride. Scarlett sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their tremor. Guests began to arrive. Local nobles, counselors, some representatives of allied houses. And then, finally, her family. Her father entered first. Tall, broad-shouldered, gray hair slicked back, Lord Cromwell, leader of the Western Pack. He commanded the attention of everyone in the hall without saying a word. Behind him came her stepmother, Lady Elena, all in green and emerald jewels, beautiful in a calculated way, with a smile that never reached her eyes. And last, her half-brother Derek, only 2 years older than Scarlett, but already arrogant and cruel like his father. Her father's eyes met hers across the hall. There was no warmth there, no family recognition, only cold assessment. Scarlett forced herself to breathe. Her hands tightened on the napkin under the table. "Scarlett, you are well fed, I see." It was not a compliment. There was something sharp in the way he said it, a veiled criticism about her weight. "Yes, father," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I hope you are being useful, fulfilling your role adequately." Scarlett's hands tightened on the napkin under the table. "I'm doing my best. Your best." He laughed, a humorless sound. "I suppose for that you are adequate, to be beautiful and quiet." Silence fell over the table. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Scarlett felt her cheeks flush, but kept her head held high. Her shoulders, however, had curved slightly, an automatic reflex, years of conditioning. "Oh, father is always so sincere." She forced a light laugh, trying to turn the humiliation into a family joke. But her voice trembled slightly, betraying her. Killian said nothing, but she felt the sudden tension in him beside her. He was watching every detail. Scarlett always had trouble accepting the truth, her father continued, picking up his wine glass with deliberate calm. Too sensitive, like her mother. The mention of her mother was like a slap. Scarlett felt her throat tighten. "Father, but I suppose His Majesty will discover that soon enough." Cromwell looked at Killian, ignoring her completely. She is beautiful, I admit, but stubborn, rebellious. I had to correct her many times when she was younger. Correct. The word made Scarlett's stomach churn. Her hands were visibly trembling now, even clasped in her lap. She lowered her eyes to her plate, unable to maintain eye contact. Her shoulders curved more, the defensive posture as natural as breathing. Perhaps marriage will teach her what I could not, her father concluded, taking a sip of wine as if discussing the weather. Killian still hadn't spoken, but Scarlett could feel his eyes on her now, studying every detail, the way her shoulders had automatically curved, how she avoided looking at her own father, how her hands trembled even trying to hide them. The silence stretched. Heavy, suffocating. Then Killian placed his fork on the table. Lord Cromwell, his voice was low, controlled, but there was ice in every syllable. Lady Scarlett is under my roof now. He didn't defend her directly, but the tone was unequivocal. A line had been drawn. Her father's face remained neutral, but Scarlett saw the tightening in his jaw. Of course, Your Majesty. I didn't intend to, didn't you? Killian interrupted him, his voice still dangerously calm. Then I suggest you choose your words more carefully. In this hall, all guests are treated with respect. Killian was setting boundaries, marking political territory, but even so, it was more than anyone had ever done for her. Her father nodded stiffly, his flushed face controlled by pure willpower. As you wish, Your Majesty. The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence, forced conversations about safe topics, no one daring to mention what had just happened. Scarlett pushed food around her plate without eating, her heart still racing, her hands still trembling. When it finally ended, Cromwell stood up. Your Majesty, I would like to speak with my daughter. In private, some family matters need to be discussed. Panic rose in Scarlett's throat like bile. But Killian nodded. Jasper, show them to the smaller hall. Scarlett stood on autopilot, her legs weak, following her father and Jasper out of the main hall. She felt Killian's gaze on her back, but she didn't turn around. She didn't trust her own face at that moment. The smaller hall was exactly that. Smaller, more intimate, with just a fireplace and a few chairs. Jasper left them alone, closing the door behind him. Scarlett stood near the fireplace, her arms crossed defensively, trying to make herself smaller. Her father waited until Jasper's footsteps disappeared. Then he turned to her. Your deadline is approaching. His voice was low, controlled, but laden with threat. I know. You know? Cromwell took a step towards her. Because from where I stand, it seems you're settling in quite well here. Scarlett's hands began to tremble. She held her right wrist with her left hand, trying to control the shaking. But it was no use. Her fingers trembled visibly. Do you think this is a game? Her father hissed, noticing the tremor. Do you think I have time for your pathetic hesitations? I need the medicine, Scarlett said, her voice coming out weaker than intended. Please, father, I'm trying, but The slap came so fast she had no time to protect herself. The force made her head snap to the side, the taste of blood immediate in her mouth. You did nothing, he growled, grabbing her chin tightly, forcing her to look at him. You don't deserve my pity. You don't deserve the antidote until you prove you're worth something. Tears burned in Scarlett's eyes, but she blinked furiously to keep them at bay. You have less than 2 months. Cromwell released her face with a push. Kill him. Complete the plan, or I'll let the poison do its work. The door closed with a muffled thud. Scarlett stood there, trembling, her hand instinctively going to the corner of her mouth. When she looked at her fingers, there was blood. That's how Nadia found her moments later, leaning against the wall. Nadia dropped the tray and ran to her. Scarlett, what did he do? Scarlett whispered, her voice distant. He won't give me the antidote until I complete the mission. Nadia carefully wiped the blood from the corner of Scarlett's mouth, her own eyes filled with suppressed tears. Chapter 5. The following days were tense in a different way. Scarlett's father left the next morning, but the tension remained. Killian didn't mention anything about what happened at dinner, but Scarlett felt his eyes on her more often, studying, evaluating, and her hands continued to tremble. At first, it was just occasional. A slight tremor while holding a teacup, unsteady fingers when adjusting a shawl. But with each passing day, it got worse. Nadia tried to hide it. She gave her gloves to wear, made excuses when Scarlett dropped things, but it was impossible to completely disguise it. Killian noticed. Your hands, he said one afternoon when they crossed paths in the gardens. Scarlett quickly hid them behind her back. It's just the cold. It's getting better outside. Spring is coming. Then I'm sensitive to the cold, she replied, trying to sound casual, but her voice was tense. Killian studied her for a long moment, then nodded and walked away, but she saw the way his jaw tightened. the way his hands clenched slightly. He knew she was lying. It was in the second week without the antidote that everything fell apart. Scarlett was with Lucan and Killian in the gardens. The boy had brought a stone game he had found, excited to show it off. He was more talkative now, more comfortable with both of them. And then you put this one here, and Lucan was explaining the rules when Scarlett felt it. Dizziness came first. The world swayed, colors becoming too bright and then too dark. Scarlett? Killian's voice sounded distant. Are you all right? She tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The ground tilted beneath her feet. And then everything went black. Scarlett woke up in her bed, but something was different. The light was stronger than it should be. There were voices, several of them, speaking in urgent tones. She tried to open her eyes completely, but everything was spinning. I've never seen anything like it. The tremor, the paleness, the fever. A voice she didn't recognize. Male. Then cure her. Killian's voice, sharp as ice. Your Majesty, I cannot cure what I cannot identify. The symptoms suggest poisoning, but without knowing the toxin, poisoning? The word came out as a growl. Scarlett forced her eyes open. The light hurt, but she managed to focus. There was an old man beside the bed, the physician, presumably. Killian was near the window, his back tense, his hands clenched. And Nadia was sitting in the chair beside the bed, holding Scarlett's hand, her face stained with tears. Killian turned when he realized she was awake. In 3 long strides, he was beside the bed. You don't seem surprised. What's going on? She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Nadia immediately offered water, helping her drink slowly. I need to know, Killian insisted, but his voice had softened slightly. If you've been poisoned, I need to know with what, so we can find the antidote. Scarlett looked at him. At those gray eyes that had been so cold when she arrived, but which now showed something different. Scarlett's gaze swept around the room, to everyone present, and Killian understood. Everyone out, he ordered, without raising his tone. Now, the doors closed behind them. The room fell silent, only the sound of Scarlett's heavy breathing and the faint crackle of wood in the fireplace. When they were alone, Scarlett finally confessed the truth. She couldn't keep it to herself any longer. Only my father knows, she whispered finally. Killian froze. What? The poison? The antidote? Only he knows. The words came out with difficulty, each one an effort. He poisoned me years ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Explain, Killian said, his voice dangerously calm. Now. So Scarlett told him everything. How her father had started giving her small doses of poison, how he controlled the symptoms with the antidote, giving it only when she obeyed, how he had promised a complete cure if she completed a mission to kill Killian, to dominate both territories, so he could become the supreme leader. When she finished, Scarlett was exhausted. Silent tears streamed down her face, but she barely had the energy to wipe them away. Killian said nothing for a long moment. He just stood there, processing. She could see the war happening in his eyes. Anger, betrayal, understanding, more anger. He turned abruptly and walked to the door, his firm, furious footsteps echoing in the room. And then he left, slamming the door so hard that the pictures on the walls trembled. Scarlett closed her eyes, new tears falling. She had lost everything. Killian would never trust her again. And without the antidote, she would die anyway. Outside, Killian found the physician at the door. Your Majesty, the physician began. Keep her stable, Killian said without looking back. Do whatever is necessary. The following days were a blur of pain and fever. Scarlett drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she woke to find the physician checking her temperature, forcing liquids and bitter herbs down her throat. Sometimes it was Nadia, wiping her face with a damp cloth, murmuring soothing words. And sometimes, more often than she would have expected, it was Killian. He would sit in the chair beside the bed, in silence, just watching. Occasionally, he held a cup for her to drink. Once, when the fever was particularly high, she woke to feel a cool hand against her forehead, brushing away hair matted with sweat. Rest. His voice was soft, so different from the cold king she had known at the beginning. Just rest. You shouldn't be here, she mumbled, barely able to keep her eyes open. I'm supposed to kill you. But she had already fallen back asleep before he could reply. You're just trying to survive, he corrected gently, whispering. There's a difference. It was on the 5th day that the fever finally broke. Scarlett woke to the soft light of the afternoon. Her head still ached, and her body felt weak, but the fog had dissipated. She could think clearly for the first time in days. Killian was sitting in the chair beside the bed, but this time he wasn't just watching. He had a book open on his lap, one she had seen in the library. He was reading aloud, perhaps thinking she was still asleep. His voice was different like this, softer, almost intimate. "Are you reading to me?" Scarlett asked, her voice hoarse but stronger than it had been. Killian quickly raised his head. For a moment, something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps even embarrassment at being caught in that vulnerable moment. He slowly closed the book. "You're awake." He leaned forward, studying her face intently. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by horses," she admitted, trying to adjust herself in bed. The movement made her body protest, and she grimaced. Killian moved instinctively, reaching out a hand to help her, but stopped midway, as if unsure whether he should touch her. The hesitation lasted only a second before his fingers reached her arm, helping her settle among the pillows. The touch was careful, almost reverent. "Better?" he asked, his voice lower now. He still hadn't removed his hand. "Yes." Scarlett was too aware of his proximity, of the warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of her nightgown. "Thank you." Killian finally released her arm but didn't pull away. He stayed there, sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "The physician says you're stable, for now. But without the antidote, I know." Scarlett looked at her hand, still trembling slightly, but not as violently as before. "How long do I have?" "Weeks, maybe a month," he said reluctantly, and there was something painful in his voice, as if the words physically hurt him. A heavy silence fell between them. Scarlett could hear her own breathing, the distant crackle of the fireplace somewhere in the castle. "Scarlett," Killian began, but she interrupted him. "You don't have to say it." The words came out too quickly. "I understand. After knowing why I'm really here, do you think I blame you?" Killian stood up abruptly, the chair creaking under the sudden movement. He walked to the window, his back tense, his hands clenched, for having to choose between your life and this? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Scarlett had begun to recognize as a sign of deep frustration. "I am angry, yes, furious." He turned, and when his eyes met hers, there was fire there. But it wasn't anger directed at her. It was something more complex, more intense. "But not at you." The words hung in the air between them. "He poisoned you, Scarlett. Used you." Killian took a step towards the bed, then another. "And you still blame yourself? Still think I should hate you?" "I should have resisted," Scarlett began, but her voice faltered. "How?" He was closer now, stopping at the foot of the bed. "You were a child." He had all the control. Tears burned in Scarlett's eyes. "But I was going to kill you. I carried the dagger every day. Planned the moment, the places where you were vulnerable. And you didn't." Killian moved around the bed, returning to her side. This time, when he sat on the edge, he was closer, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "Because I'm a coward?" "No." The word came out firm, definitive. Killian slowly extended his hand, giving her time to pull back, and gently touched her chin, guiding her face so she would look at him. "Because you are not a killer." His touch burned. Not with fever, but with something entirely different. Scarlett could see every detail of his face now, the small scars near his temple, the shadow of stubble beginning to appear, the darker flecks in his gray eyes that seemed softer in the afternoon light. "You don't know me." "I'm not good, Killian. I spent months planning," she whispered. "And I was cruel to you while you were just trying to survive." His hand slid from her chin to her cheek, his thumb gently brushing beneath her eye, wiping away a tear she hadn't even realized had fallen. "We both made mistakes." He was so close now, close enough for Scarlett to feel his breath, to see the way his eyes darkened slightly when they focused on her lips for a fraction of a second. Scarlett's heart pounded. Killian. His hand was still on her cheek, the touch so gentle it contrasted completely with the intensity in his eyes. "Don't speak. Just let me say this, because if I don't say it now, I might never have another chance." He took a deep breath. "You entered this castle as my enemy, and now..." He closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to find the right words. "I'm dying," Scarlett whispered, the raw reality of the words cutting through the moment. "In weeks, maybe less. Then give me these weeks." His eyes opened, and there was pleading there, a vulnerability she had never seen in him. "Give me every day, every hour, because I wasted so much time keeping you at arm's length when I should have..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to, because Scarlett moved first. She ignored the weakness in her muscles, the pain in her body, and leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Her hand went to the back of his neck, fingers intertwining in his dark hair, and when their lips met, it was as if the whole world stopped. The kiss began gently hesitant, almost reverent. Killian held her face with both hands now, as if she were something precious and fragile. But when Scarlett sighed against his lips, something changed. Gentleness gave way to urgency, to the need of someone who knows time is running out. Killian's hand slid into her hair, deepening the kiss, and Scarlett clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling. He tasted of peppermint tea and something more intense. When they finally broke apart, Killian tilted his head, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "This complicates everything," he murmured. The words hung in the air between them. "Killian, I would never do something like that. I just needed you to know, before it's too late, before you decide anything." He pulled back slightly, holding her face so she would look at him. Scarlett said, "Reality's slowly returning. He has the antidote. He has all the control, but I couldn't." Killian was silent for a moment, his jaw tense, his gaze fixed on her. "We crossed a line, didn't we?" he said, his voice slow, almost hoarse. "And I don't want to go back." He leaned in a little, his gaze fixed on hers. "I know this could ruin me, but I can't stop. You are the poison I chose to drink." For an instant, the silence seemed thicker than the air. He touched her face lightly, without tenderness, like someone accepting a fate they could no longer change. He kissed her again, softer this time, and when he pulled away, there was surrender in his eyes. And then he left, leaving Scarlett alone with a confused heart, dangerous hope growing in her chest, and the taste of him still on her lips. Because somewhere her father was planning, and at some point she would have to make a choice, her life, or his. But now, Scarlett didn't know exactly what she would choose. Chapter 6. Scarlett forced herself to get up the next day, despite Nadia's protests. She dressed carefully, choosing a gown that disguised her pallor, and styled her hair to hide how lifeless it had become. "You should rest more," Nadia said, concern clear in her voice as she adjusted the shawl on Scarlett's shoulders. "I've rested enough days," Scarlett replied, forcing a smile. "People will start asking questions, and my father, he can't know how weak I am." Nadia bit her lip, but nodded. She understood. Showing weakness now would be giving Cromwell exactly what he wanted, confirmation that his control over Scarlett was absolute. When Scarlett descended for breakfast, several faces turned in her direction. Jasper seemed genuinely relieved. "Lady Scarlett, it's good to see you recovered." "Thank you, Jasper." She kept her smile firm, ignoring the dizziness that threatened to fell her. It was just a fever, nothing a little rest couldn't cure. Killian was seated at the head of the table. His eyes met hers immediately, and Scarlett saw the concern there, deep and unmistakable. But he said nothing, only stood and pulled out the chair beside his. "Sit," he said softly, his hand briefly touching her back as she settled. The touch was discreet, but laden with meaning. During breakfast, Scarlett chatted animatedly with the nobles present, made light jokes, even laughed at a story one of the counselors told. To everyone else at the table, she seemed completely recovered. But Killian noticed. He noticed how she pushed food around her plate instead of eating, how her fingers trembled slightly when she held her teacup, how she breathed a little deeper than she should, as if the simple act of sitting there required effort. When breakfast ended, she rose gracefully, bidding polite farewells. But as she passed Killian, he gently touched her arm. "I need to speak with you later." Scarlett nodded, that fixed smile still on her face. She spent the morning in the gardens with Lucan. The boy was radiant to see her, talking endlessly about everything that had happened while she was ill. "And then the squirrel jumped right onto my head," Lucan laughed, dramatizing the story. "The king said it was because I smelled like nuts." "Smelled," Scarlett laughed, a sound that cost more energy than it should have. "Were you carrying nuts in your pocket again?" "Maybe," Lucan admitted, unashamed. Scarlett watched him play, running among the trees that were beginning to blossom. Spring was truly here now, transforming everything into shades of green and delicate flowers. It was beautiful, almost painfully beautiful, and Scarlett wasn't sure she would live to see summer. "Scarlett?" Lucan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you okay? You got all quiet." "I'm great," she replied quickly, the smile returning to her face as if nothing had happened. "Just thinking about how much you've grown. You're almost as tall as I am." "That's not true," Lucan laughed. "But I will grow. The king said if I eat right, I'll be tall like him." "The king said that?" Scarlett arched an eyebrow, surprised. "He says many things when you're not around," Lucan said innocently. "Mostly about you." Scarlett's heart skipped a beat. "About me?" But Lucan had already run off after another butterfly, the conversation forgotten. That's when Scarlett felt it. That familiar sensation, the metallic taste in her mouth. the pressure in her chest. She turned quickly, pretending to examine a flower, and coughed discreetly into her hand. When she looked at her palm, there was blood. She quickly wiped it on the inside of her shawl, making sure Lucan didn't see. She took a deep breath, forcing the tremor in her hands to stop. Not now. Please, not now. Scarlett, Lucan called. Come see, there's a nest here. She turned, a smile returning to her face as if nothing had happened. Chapter 7. In the dark corridor, the light under Killian's study door was like a beacon. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and saw him. He was hunched over the large desk, his hair disheveled as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. She watched for a moment, seeing the tension in his shoulders. Are you all right? Her voice sounded hoarse in the quiet. Killian quickly raised his head. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a deep weariness he never allowed others to see. I wish things were simpler for us, he replied, tossing the quill onto the table. She smiled, entering the room. Her eyes scanned the maps. They were defense schemes, supply routes for the Western Pack. What are you doing? He followed her gaze, trying to find a weakness. A way to force your father to give the antidote without precipitating a war that would kill thousands. She stopped on the other side of the desk, her hands resting on the cold wood. And are you finding one? Frustration overflowed from him. No, your father only understands force, and any move I make he will use as an excuse to retaliate against you and against my people. A discreet knock on the door interrupted the moment. Killian took a breath, recomposing his face into a mask of regal composure before speaking. Enter. A messenger, the dust of the road still on his boots, entered and knelt. Your Highness, a raven has arrived from the east. The message is sealed with the burning wolf crest of the Western Pack. The man extended a parchment with a red ribbon, the black wax seal bearing the grotesque effigy of a wolf Lord Cromwell's personal symbol. Killian opened it, Scarlett beside him. The message was simple and brutal. To King Killian, I propose a meeting. Matters need to be discussed regarding our alliance and my daughter. I expect Scarlett to be present, radiant, and healthy as ever. Until then, Lord Cromwell. The silence that followed was absolute. He knows I'm getting worse without the medicine. The thought hit Scarlett like a blow. Her legs wavered and she had to lean on the table to keep from falling. This was not an invitation. It was a trap. A final test of loyalty. Killian approached and enveloped her in his arms, holding her firmly. Don't worry, he murmured against her hair, his voice low but resolute. You will be all right. Our love is a risk I'm willing to take. With deliberate movements, Killian took the parchment and walked to the fireplace. His eyes never left hers as he tossed the letter into the embers, letting the flames consume her father's message. They watched in silence as the wax seal was devoured by the fire. Chapter 8. The carriage traversed the dusty road towards the Western Territory. Scarlett watched the landscape through the window, her fingers intertwined in her lap to hide the constant tremor. The dress Nadia had chosen was stunning, golden as the setting sun, with intricate embroidery. It was a masterpiece designed to mask the truth. She was dying. Killian sat beside her, formally dressed in black and silver, his posture regal but his eyes constantly returning to her. He had insisted on accompanying her, despite Jasper's protests about the risks. Are you all right? He asked softly, for the third time that hour. I am, Scarlett lied, but she had learned to hide the pain. Years with her father had taught her that. Killian's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining firmly. No matter what happens today, he said, his voice low but intense. You are not alone. Scarlett squeezed his hand back, unable to trust her voice to reply. Cromwell's castle was an intimidating fortress of dark stone, with towers that pierced the sky like claws. Scarlett felt her stomach clench as the doors opened, revealing the hall where she had grown up, where she had learned that love and pain were often the same thing. The ball was already in full swing. Nobles whirled across the dance floor, their extravagant clothes creating a kaleidoscope of colors under the light of hundreds of candles. Music filled the air, strings and flutes playing a joyful melody that contrasted violently with the tension Scarlett felt. Lord Cromwell awaited them at the top of the grand staircase, dressed in blood red and gold, a simple but intimidating crown upon his gray hair. Beside him, Elena smiled her cold smile, and Derek watched them with barely disguised disdain. Your Majesty. Cromwell descended the steps with the predatory grace of a wolf. What an honor to receive you in my humble home. There was nothing humble there, and everyone knew it. Killian bowed his head with the bare minimum of courtesy required. Lord Cromwell. Cromwell's eyes then turned to Scarlett. Something dark gleamed there. Assessment. Control. Veiled threat. My dear daughter, come embrace your father. She had no choice. She released Killian's hand and ascended the steps. When Cromwell pulled her into an embrace, she felt her entire body stiffen. His lips brushed her ear, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. This is your last chance. I will create a diversion. Kill him in that moment, or you will die with him." Scarlett pulled away, forcing a filial smile as her heart hammered against her ribs. Her eyes met Killian's. At the base of the stairs he was tense, observing every nuance of the interaction. "Let us celebrate!" Cromwell announced to the hall, his voice echoing through the stone walls. "To the union of our peoples, to lasting peace." He raised his goblet and everyone in the hall did the same, applause and cheers filling the air. But Scarlett barely heard. The music began, a slow, elegant waltz. "Will you grant me this dance, Lady Scarlett?" She placed her hand in his, feeling the strength and warmth there. Always. They descended together to the dance floor, and when Killian pulled her into his arms, the rest of the hall seemed to fade. One firm hand on her waist, the other holding her trembling fingers with infinite gentleness. They began to move, whirling across the floor in perfect synchronization. It was as if they had danced together 1,000 times before, each step natural, each movement fluid. And then he felt it. His hand on her waist slid lightly and his eyes darkened when they found the outline of a dagger strapped to her thigh. He knew, and still he did not stop dancing. He did not release her. He only pulled her closer, his lips almost touching her temple. "I thought we would have more time." Killian, let me explain." That's when it happened. A scream pierced the air, then another. Flames exploded from the curtains on the side of the hall, an unnatural fire that spread with impossible speed. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests ran in all directions, expensive dresses trampled in the desperate rush to escape, screams filled the air, the smell of smoke growing with each second. But Killian and Scarlett did not stop dancing. He held her tighter, guiding her through the waltz steps as the world burned around them. Flames lit the walls, climbing the curtains, devouring the tables with a ravenous hunger. And they danced. Killian looked down, meeting her eyes. "So you made your choice? Just let this music finish," he said, his voice too calm for the situation. As if they were alone in an empty ballroom, not surrounded by fire and chaos. Others ran, pushed, screamed, but they continued at their slow, deliberate pace, whirling among the flames as if immune to danger. Smoke began to fill the hall, but the music continued. The musicians had fled, but the melody echoed in their minds, dictating every step. Scarlett could feel the heat now, sweat beginning to form on her forehead, but she couldn't take her eyes off him. She couldn't stop moving in perfect harmony with him. The music was coming to an end, the last measures lingering like a final sigh. The last notes hung in the air. The waltz was ending. Scarlett pulled away, her hand going to her thigh, fingers closing around the hilt of the dagger. She pulled it free, in a fluid motion, the blade gleaming in the firelight. Killian did not defend himself. He only watched her, those gray eyes calm and clear. "You don't understand," she whispered. And then she attacked. The blade cut through the air in a perfect arc, years of brutal training guiding every movement. Killian did not try to dodge. He simply closed his eyes, awaiting the impact. But it did not come. At the last second, Scarlett diverted the blow. The dagger passed inches beside his ribs, tearing only the fabric of his tunic, and embedded itself in the wooden pillar behind him. "I chose you," Scarlett said, her voice broken but firm. Killian slowly opened his eyes, shock crossing his features. He looked at the dagger buried in the wood beside him, then back at her, and then his knees gave out. He fell heavily, a hand going to his chest as if he had actually been struck. A slow clap filled the air. Scarlett turned her head abruptly. Her father emerged from the smoke like a specter, clapping deliberately, a cruel smile distorting his face. Derek followed close behind. "Finally," Cromwell said, stopping a few feet from them. "I knew that when faced with death, you would make the right choice." He bent down slightly, observing Killian lying, his breath still ragged. The mighty Killian. Doesn't look so intimidating now, does he? But then Cromwell frowned. Something was wrong. He leaned further forward, his eyes scanning Killian's body for injuries. There was no blood, no visible wound. Cromwell's eyes narrowed dangerously. He looked at Scarlett, then at the dagger still embedded in the pillar, then back at Killian, and slow understanding crossed his face, transforming into absolute fury. "You are useless," he spat, his voice low and venomous. He took a step forward, his hand going to his ornate cane. "I'll do the job myself." What happened next was so fast, Scarlett barely had time to process it. Cromwell pulled the cane, and with a fluid movement, the outer wood separated, revealing a thin, deadly sword hidden within. The blade gleamed with a greenish hue poisoned. Killian rose in an explosive movement, all previous weakness vanishing. It had been a trap he had feigned injury to draw Cromwell close, Steel met steel with a clang that echoed through the burning hall. They moved with deadly speed, Killian with the brute force and technique of a trained warrior, Cromwell with the cunning and cruelty of decades of dirty battles. Cromwell's poisoned blade cut the air in dangerous arcs, each strike intended to kill. Killian dodged, blocked, counterattacked, but Scarlett could see he was being too cautious. A single cut from that blade would be fatal. "Do you think you can defeat me, boy?" Cromwell hissed, attacking again. Killian didn't reply, too focused on not getting hit. But Cromwell was faster than he seemed, cunning and relentless. And then it happened. A quick blow, too low to be fully blocked. The tip of the poisoned sword sliced Killian's arm, tearing the skin. It wasn't deep, but it didn't need to be. The poison would do the rest. Killian stumbled. He felt the effect immediately. The world began to spin, his legs growing weak. "Killian!" Scarlett screamed, but Cromwell was between them, his sword raised for the final blow. "Goodbye, Killian," Cromwell said, the blade descending in a deadly arc, but had never completed the movement. Scarlett moved. Years of brutal training by her father had taught her more than just how to kill. They had taught her how to survive. She snatched the dagger from the pillar and threw herself forward, blocking Cromwell's blow with a force that took him completely by surprise. Cromwell blinked, genuinely shocked. Then his face contorted in fury. "You dare," he attacked, but Scarlett was already moving. She dodged with the fluidity that years of forced practice had given her, spun, and counterattacked. Cromwell blocked, but this time it was he who took a step back. They circled each other, the burning hall around them providing a dancing, sinister light. Derek had vanished into the smoke, coward as ever. Killian lay a few feet behind, fighting off the effects of the poison. "You're good," Cromwell admitted, a hint of perverse pride in his voice. "I trained you well. You tortured me," Scarlett corrected, attacking again. "There's a difference." The combat was fierce. Cromwell was stronger, more experienced, but he was already wounded from the previous fight, with Killian cuts on his arm and shoulder bled, slowing his movements. And Scarlett was fighting for something more than survival now. She was fighting for freedom, for Killian, for all the years of pain her father had caused. The dagger found flesh, a deep cut on Cromwell's thigh, making him stumble. "Impossible," he gasped, trying to advance again. But his legs gave out, blood loss finally taking its toll. Scarlett kicked his sword away, the blade sliding across the marble floor. Then she placed the tip of her own dagger against his throat. "It's over," she said, her breathing heavy but her hand steady. "Your reign of terror is over." Cromwell looked at her, and for the first time in her life, Scarlett saw fear in his eyes. "You don't have the courage," he said, but his voice trembled. Scarlett leaned closer, the blade pressing against his skin. "Watch me." But she didn't need to. A low, menacing growl filled the air. Wolves, dozens of them. Emerging from the smoke like living shadows, Killian's reinforcements had arrived. Huge black beasts encircling them in a tight ring. Jasper came forward, already shifting back to human form. "Your Majesty." His eyes immediately went to Killian, still fallen. "Are you alive?" Killian gasped, struggling to sit up. The poison still burned in his veins, but he was conscious. "Cromwell, arrest him." Two wolves advanced, their jaws closing around Cromwell's wrists, forcing him to the ground. He didn't fight, he knew, when he was defeated. Scarlett pulled away, the dagger still in her hand, and rushed to Killian. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she searched for the wound. "The poison," she began, panic tinging her voice. "It will pass," Killian said. But even as he spoke, she could see the sweat on his forehead, the increasing pallor. Scarlett whirled to her father, fury exploding. "Where is the antidote? Where is the damn antidote?" Cromwell laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think I'll just hand it over? Where is it?" Scarlett stood, the dagger still in her hand. "Or I swear I'll—" In his chambers, a faint voice said. Elena, her stepmother, had appeared at the entrance of the hall, her green dress singed and torn. She seemed smaller now, without the aura of power she normally carried. In the secret safe behind the painting of his late wife, there are 2 vials, one blue, one red. Scarlett wasted no time. She ran, traversing corridors she knew, as well as the back of her hand. Her father's chambers were luxurious and intimidating, but she went straight for the painting, a portrait of her mother, that he kept only as a private torture for Scarlett. She ripped the frame from the wall, revealing a small safe. It was locked, but she grabbed the candelabra from the table and smashed the lock until it gave way. Inside, exactly as Elena said, were 2 vials. One light blue, almost translucent. One dark red like blood. She grabbed both and ran back. Killian was worse when she returned. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed. Jasper held him, keeping him conscious, while other wolves had taken Cromwell outside. "Which one?" Scarlett asked Elena desperately, who was still there, watching everything with an empty expression. "The blue is for the blade poison. The red," she looked at Scarlett, and for the first time, there was something close to compassion in her eyes. The red is for the poison he gave you. Scarlett didn't hesitate. She opened the blue vial and brought it to Killian's lips. Drink, please. He obeyed, drinking all the liquid. Almost immediately, she saw the color slowly returning to his face, his breathing becoming deeper, more regular. Scarlett? He said, his hand finding hers. Take yours. She looked at the red vial in her hand. Freedom. Life. Everything her father had denied her for years. With trembling fingers, she opened it and drank. The liquid was bitter, burning her throat, but she swallowed every last drop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she felt it. A wave of warmth spreading through her body, sweeping away the weakness, the pain, the constant tremor. It was as if invisible chains were being broken, one by one. She took a deep breath, her first truly free breath in years. 3 months later, spring had given way to full summer. The castle gardens were in glorious bloom. Roses climbed the stone walls, their red, white, and pink petals creating a mosaic of color. The sound of running water from the newly built fountains mingled with birdsong. Peace. Finally, there was peace. Scarlett sat on the stone bench in the gardens, the same bench where she had met Lucan months ago, watching Killian and the boy play something vaguely resembling tag. Lucan had grown significantly in the past few months. Regular food and a safe roof over his head had worked wonders. He was no longer the skinny, frightened child stealing bread from the kitchens. Now he laughed freely, ran without fear, and called Killian father without hesitation. You're too slow, Lucan teased, easily dodging Killian. Too old. Old? Killian feigned offense. I'll show you old. He sped up, catching Lucan and lifting him into the air. The boy shrieked with delight, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Scarlett watched with a smile that wouldn't leave her face. Her heart was so full it threatened to overflow. Nadia approached, carrying a tray with tea and biscuits. She, too, looked different, lighter, happier. She was no longer just Scarlett's handmaiden, but her true friend and close confidant. They'll hurt themselves one of these days, Nadia remarked, but she was smiling too. Probably, Scarlett agreed, accepting a cup of tea. But let them enjoy themselves. The territory had changed radically under the new leadership. Killian and Scarlett ruled together, their decisions based on compassion and justice rather than fear and cruelty. The harshest laws had been abolished. Orphans like Lucan now had homes. Families no longer went hungry. Cromwell had been exiled beyond the frozen lands, forever banished from returning. Derek had fled on the night of the ball and was never seen again. Elena had retreated to a monastery, seeking, perhaps, some form of redemption. And the 2 packs east and west finally lived in harmony, no longer divided by hatred and war, but united by something stronger. Hope. Killian finally released Lucan, who raced over to Scarlett and threw himself down beside her on the bench. Did you see? I won. I did, Scarlett laughed, ruffling his hair. Well done. Killian approached, sweat glistening lightly on his forehead, but smiling in a way that made Scarlett's heart leap. He sat on her other side, his arm wrapping around her shoulders naturally. Looks like someone finally met their match, Scarlett commented softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. This little wolf is unbeatable, he replied, kissing her temple. I must concede defeat. You said you'd train with me tomorrow too, Lucan reminded him, excited. Of course, Killian confirmed, ruffling the boy's hair. A promise is a promise. Lucan watched them with a shy smile. I like it when you're together like this, he said quietly, almost embarrassed. It feels like we have a real family. He sprang from the bench and ran off to chase a butterfly, his laughter echoing through the gardens. Scarlett leaned back against Killian, her head on his shoulder, watching Lucan play. Sunlight filtered through the trees, creating dancing patterns on the ground. Flowers swayed in the gentle breeze, and everything was perfect in a way she had never imagined possible. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe. It might seem small, but it really helps me keep writing. See you in the next story.